Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Hey guys, Dave in here with Worship Leader Hangout, and today we are talking about tritones. I'm really excited for today's lesson because it's a little bit longer than my other videos, but that's because I want you to understand the concept and how to use it. So we're going to talk about tritones, tritone voicings, and then tritone substitutions. Because this video is a bit longer than my others, we're going to have timestamps below where you can click on those timestamps and go to that particular section that you're interested in. So remember, we're talking about tritones, tritone voicings, and then tritone substitutions. Well, let's get right to the lesson. So what is a tritone? A tritone describes the distance between two notes, and that distance is 3 whole steps. So let's look at C, for example. From C to D is 1 whole step. From D to E is the 2nd whole step. From E to F sharp is a 3rd whole step. So C and F sharp are a tritone. All right, let's look at another example. From F to G is 1 whole step. From G to A is a 2nd whole step. And from A to B is a 3rd whole step, right? So F and B are a tritone apart. One more example. From G to A is a 1 whole step. From A to B is another whole step. And from B to C sharp is a 3rd whole step. So G and C sharp are a tritone apart. Now, let's look at some chords and see where we can find tritones in chords that hopefully we know already. So we're going to look at dominant chords, augmented chords, and then diminished chords. All right. So let's look at a C dominant chord. Now, how do you find a C dominant chord? Well, you would go to the 7th degree of the C major scale, which would be B. 7, we drop that 7 by a half step to the B flat, and now that gives us our C dominant chord, okay? Now, in this chord, we have a tritone. That tritone is an E and a B flat. Now, let's test that for a second. We have E to F sharp is 1 whole step, F sharp to G sharp is a 2nd whole step, and G sharp to B flat or A sharp is a 3rd whole step. So the distance between E and B flat is a tritone. All right. So we have a tritone in there. So what does that tell us about dominant chords? That tells us that if we play the 3rd and the 7th degree of that dominant chord, that is a tritone in there. It's important to remember that, especially as we move forward into more complex discussion. So let's now look at a diminished chord. Let's look at a C diminished chord for a second. C diminished is this, and there's a tritone in here, and we actually looked at that earlier, but let's test where the tritone is. From C to F sharp is the tritone, and let's test it. So from C to D is 1 whole step. From D to E is a 2nd whole step, and from E to F sharp is the 3rd whole step. So that tells us that in our diminished chord, the 1st degree and the 3rd degree of that chord are a tritone apart. So we need to remember it for dominant chords, which is the 3rd and the 7th, and then for diminished chords, which is the 1st and 3rd. All right. Now let's look at augmented chords. Okay, so let's look at a C augmented 7 chord. All right. So this, in the augmented chord, you actually find the same tritone that you do in the diminished chord, right? Which is the E and the B flat, which are a tritone apart, okay? So that tells us in the augmented chord, the same rule for the dominant chord applies. The third and the flat 7 are a tritone apart. All right, remember that, okay? Because now we're gonna move into tritone voicing. When you know that information, what can you do with it, right? So let's say you were playing a dominant chord in a song like, let's say Amazing Grace, for example. You can actually take the third of the chords and the seventh of the chords that you're playing and play them in your left hand, and it'll give you that like bluesy gospel sound. So Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. All right. So for the first two chords, I played a tritone. All right. Do you see that tritone in my left hand? All right. Sing grace, how sweet. Now in my left hand, we have another tritone from D to A flat. Sweet the sound. So that's something that you can do with the tritone. You can take it and move it into either your right or left hand. So now let's take a song, a more contemporary song, and let's apply this concept to it. Now I worked through this song where I would apply both tritone voicings in my left and right hand, and also tritone substitutions. So let me play through this song for you, and then we'll work through the different concepts, all right? And the song is Waymaker, and we're going to just do the chorus, but the verses are the exact same. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. All right, so you just saw the basic chords of the song. Now let's play it with some substitutions, all right? Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. All right. So I hope you saw some ways. All of those were really ways I was thinking through, like, how can I apply tritones to this? Some you may like, some you may not like, but it's really more so how do you apply it in a song? And so let's go through it. So let's look at the different like tritone voicings, okay? So in that, let's just start from like that second phrase that I did, right? Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. All right, so what did I do there, okay? So here we have a B dominant 7 chord. Now remember that, okay? Earlier we talked about a C dominant 7, but the rule applies. So here's something that I did, right? I took the chord and instead of playing like a dominant 7 chord, like root position or whatever, here's something you can do with the chord, and which is what I did. I just played the tritone in my right hand, and the tritone of that chord would be this flat 7 and the 3rd degree, right? And I use that to get to the E. So even though it's a B dominant 7 chord, it doesn't sound as, I don't know, like, it's not as full. It's a little bit sparse, but I kind of like it like that. You know, I kind of like that voicing. So that's just my preference. But that gives you an idea of what you can do with like a dominant 7 chord. And that's me playing in the right hand. You could also choose to play that tritone in the left. Right? Go into the E. Now, So let's see. My God, that is who you are. So that move right there is one of my favorite moves I like to do, and really I'm playing a tritone there, right? So instead of playing this F diminished chord to an F sharp minor, what I'm doing is I'm taking the tritone in that D diminished chord or F diminished chord, and I am just playing the tritone in my right hand, and then I'm sliding down to it, and then I'm just playing the F in my left, right? And that gives me kind of this cool, interesting voicing and a movement at the same time. All right. And now let's go to the second, or the third, that third, kind of like the third phrase. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. All right, so that move that I'm doing is what I'm really playing is a D augmented chord, like a D sharp 5 sharp 9. And then I'm just going down in half steps to a C sharp 5 sharp 9, which is the same thing as playing a C augmented chord, sharp 5 sharp 9 chord, to this F sharp minor here. Okay? And so I'm playing this F sharp and C in my left hand and a B flat chord in my right, which is making the D augmented chord. And then I'm playing an A chord in my right and then an F and a B tritone in my left. Okay? And then I apply that same concept, except I move it up a whole step. So I'm going from a C major chord in my right hand to a B major chord in my right hand. And then in my left hand, I'm going from an A flat D tritone to a G C sharp tritone. And really both of those chords are, this is an E augmented chord, this is a E flat augmented chord, okay? And so what I'm doing is I'm extracting the tritone from those chords. So let's look at that E augmented chord here. The tritone here, right, is the C sharp and G. And what I'm doing is I'm extracting it and putting it in my left hand. And then I'm taking the rest of the chord, which turns out to be a B major, and I'm putting it in my right, okay? So that's one way that I like to use tritones is I'm extracting it from the chord and I'm putting it in my left or my right hand to clearly create this other voicing, and then I'm putting the rest of that chord either in my right or my left hand, all right? Okay. All right. Now let's get to the final phrase. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. All right. So what was I doing there? Here, I'm using this. I'm thinking of this chord as really an E major 7. So we have this dominant chord again, not E major 7, sorry, E dominant 7. Right? And what I'm doing is I'm just removing everything away from the chord and I'm only playing the tritone for that chord. So, and because I know what the tritone is, I then slide to that D in my right hand, and then I slide to the G sharp in my left. I'm saying G sharp because it's an E major chord, but I would really like to say A flat. All right. And then I'm using that to get to my A. So, and then in the second part of that, we have this. So, light in the darkness. All right. Okay. So here are some tritones, right? I'm following this melodic line. And then what I'm going to make sure I do in my right hand is I play all the tritones for that. So, okay. Now, I kind of fill up the chord a little bit more, but that's the fundamentals of it. and I go half steps down in my left hand. Okay? And then I add that E flat in there, but you don't really need to do that, okay? So, light in the darkness, all right? And it kind of creates this dissonance that I think works, but you can decide, hey, I hate that, man. That's not working for me, all right? And then we go to this E, my God, and that is who you are. All right. And then we're going to talk about where the rest of those chords that I was using came from, because I didn't talk about everything, because those are really substitutions. All right, so we've covered what a tritone is. We've covered some tritone voicings that I use. And then now let's look at tritone substitutions. Now I want to say this again, just a reminder. If I were to play this song, I would probably not use all of these. I'm just using these as an example to show you ways that you can decide how you want to use tritones in your own playing, all right? And the truth is, it depends on like the environment that I'm in. Maybe I'm in an environment where I can be a little bit more dissonant in my playing. Then I will think, okay, what are some ways I can use tritones? But guys, I play for a white church and this ain't gonna fly. So, but you know, when I do like jazz gigs, I do try to like think a lot more in this vein. And then when I do a lot more like heavier gospel gigs, I don't like saying gigs for church stuff, that just feels wrong. But when I do more like gospel events, I like to think along this vein. So anyway, all right, let's talk about a tritone substitution. So what is a tritone substitution? Well, a substitution is replacing one chord with another chord, all right? So let's say the basic progression of this song is D to A to E to F sharp. Well, let's say I were to take that D and replace it with a B minor. I just used a chord substitution. However, that chord substitution was really based off of the relative minor of the D major. Well, we're going to talk about tritone substitutions, which you're replacing the chord with another chord that's a tritone away. So this is what I mean. Let's say you were going to play a C major or a C dominant 7, all right? And you want to use a tritone substitution. Well, what's a tritone substitution? Tritone away from C. A tritone away from C is F sharp. So now you can replace this C dominant 7 with a F sharp dominant 7. Okay? Now, that is the concept in theory, but when it comes to practice, you have to really think more artistically how you're going to manage that because of melodic lines and kind of what else everybody is playing. So sometimes, let's say I were to do my substitution, right? My tritone substitution. I may only replace the bass note. So I may replace my C with an F sharp. And that gives me enough harmonic, like, exhilarance where I'm happy with it depending on my context, okay? So, but that's what a tritone substitution is. It is replacing one chord with another chord that's a tritone away. All right, now let's look at our example and let's see how I'm applying some tritone substitution. So I'm no longer going to talk about the voicings I was using for some of my chord substitutions. All right, okay. Waymaker, okay, here we have an E flat sharp 5 sharp 9 chord. Okay, now where did I get this chord from? Well, what's a tritone away from the E flat? From E flat, it's an A. And I know that I know that I'm going to a D next because that's the beginning of the progression, right? and the progression is starting over. So I can use this A dominant 7 as my passing chord to the D. However, I want to use a tritone substitution. So what, instead of playing the A, which would be like this. Alright, so that's me using the A. Here I'm going to use the E flat sharp 5, sharp 9, right? Because it's a tritone away, all right? So, Waymaker. Sorry, I thought it was there. All right, so that's where I got that E flat sharp 5, sharp 9 chord, because E flat is a tritone away from the A, okay? Now, some people may say play a E flat dominant 7, but that seemed too bright. There really is no B flat, okay, in the A major scale, which is the key that we're in. And so in order to reduce some of the dissonance, I do replace the B flat with the B, okay? And that is what really makes it an augmented chord. And then I add the F sharp, but the F sharp is in the A major scale, all right? And the G was already there from the A dominant 7 chord, okay? All right, and the C sharp was there from the A major chord, actually, okay? All right. So that's where that chord comes in. Now let's look at the second phrase. Waymaker. Okay? All right. What chord am I using here? The truth is I have to like think through the name, but this is like a you can look at this as a B7 over F, or you can look at it as a, what does the computer say? A F7 flat 9 flat 5. Yeah, I never really thought of it that way. Okay, but anyway, I'll show you where the concept comes from, right? So, what is I'm going to an E, okay? And I can use a B dominant 7 to get to an E, all right? That's my basic secondary dominant, using a secondary dominant as a passing chord, all right? But instead of doing that, I'm going to think, okay, well, let me replace that B dominant 7 with using a tritone substitution, which would be an F. But really, I don't want to replace the whole thing and make it an F augmented chord. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add the F in the bass, okay? And still play at least a version of that B dominant 7 chord, all right? So that's where that comes from, okay? Let's get to the final phrase, all right? Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. All right, so where does that come from? All right, so I'm going to an F sharp minor chord, right? And I know that I can use a minor 2-5-1 to get there. But instead of using that full-on minor 2-5-1, I'm gonna play I'm gonna play the 2, right, as a flat augmented chord with a flat 9, and then I'm going to, instead of playing a C sharp 5 sharp 9 or this augmented chord, I'm going to replace it with its tritone substitution, with a tritone substitution, sorry, which would be a G, right? And so that gives me this chord getting to here, to this F sharp minor. And this G is a tritone away from the C sharp. And the only thing I'm really replacing is the bass note and nothing else. So and to be honest with you, sometimes I find myself playing a chord and I forget how I discovered it. And I don't remember how I came across this A flat, this A flat augmented chord with a flat 9. But I think what it could be is that somehow these notes are very similar to the notes that I was going to the G 13 to, okay? But anyway, I hope you kind of got a concept of tritones, tritone voicings, and then tritone substitutions. And a lot of times when you get into like more advanced concepts, you haven't really fully worked it out. And you could see that like I haven't fully worked it out, but I've worked it out enough to where I do apply it in my playing. And so yeah, well, thank you guys so much for watching. This is what I want you to do. Leave a comment in the comments section below, and I will choose a couple of people to give the chart and this information to for free. I'm going to choose 20 people, and I'm going to do that over the course of this next week. So go ahead, just leave a comment in the comment section below. Just say, hey man, I would like a chart. And what I'll do is I'm going to give you some voicings, some tritone voicings for dominant chords and sharp 5, sharp 9 chords. And then I'm also going to give you a chart with like tritone substitutions, so you can automatically practice going to the chord that's a tritone away from the previous chord. Well, thanks so much for watching, and remember this: great worship leaders are always learning. I'll see you in the next video.